The rain had soaked through my cheap canvas shoes hours ago, turning my socks into cold, clammy second skins that rubbed blisters into my heels with every step. I could feel Emma's small hand tightening around mine as we stood outside the gleaming restaurant, its golden light spilling onto the wet pavement like liquid warmth we couldn't touch. My daughter's other hand clutched her stuffed rabbit, the one with the missing eye that I'd sewn shut with blue thread because I couldn't afford a replacement. "Mommy, I'm hungry," she whispered, her voice so small it nearly broke me. "I know, baby. Just a little longer." But I didn't know how much longer. 3 days since the landlord had changed the locks. 2 days since I'd eaten anything more than the half sandwich Emma couldn't finish. 1 day since I'd realized that pride was a luxury I could no longer afford. The employment agency had promised me work, swore the restaurant manager position was mine, but when I'd shown up that morning, they'd looked at me like I was invisible. "Wrong experience," they said. "Wrong references. Wrong everything." The scent of garlic and wine drifted through the restaurant's entrance every time the door opened, making my stomach clench with a hunger so fierce it felt like anger. I'd walked past this place 100 times, always averting my eyes from the couples in their silk and diamonds, from the life I'd once foolishly thought I might have. Back when Emma's father had whispered promises in the dark, back before I'd discovered the money he'd stolen wasn't from his construction job, but from men who didn't forgive debts, men who'd found me 6 months after Marcus disappeared, men who'd made it clear his mistakes were now mine to pay for. I shifted Emma's weight on my hip. She was getting too big to carry, but her shoes had holes and the sidewalk was a river of rain and filth. My arms ached. Everything ached. The bruise on my ribs from where I'd fallen on the subway stairs last week throbbed with each breath. I'd learned to breathe shallowly, learned to smile through pain, learned to make my daughter believe that sleeping in the 24-hour laundromat was an adventure. "We could ask someone for help," Emma said, her voice cutting through my spiraling thoughts. "Like in the princess story, when the princess was lost. This isn't a story, sweetheart." But even as I said it, I was scanning the street for options I didn't have. The shelter was full. I'd called twice. My mother's phone went straight to voicemail, same as it had for 3 years. My friend Sarah had her own problems. 3 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment. A husband who barely made rent. I had nothing. No one. Just a daughter who deserved so much more than a mother who'd fallen in love with the wrong man and paid for it in ways that kept multiplying. That's when the car pulled up. It wasn't just a car. It was a presence. A statement. A sleek black vehicle that looked like it cost more than every apartment I'd ever lived in combined. The rain beaded on its polished surface and slid off like even water knew not to leave marks on something so pristine. It stopped directly in front of the restaurant, and I instinctively stepped back, pulling Emma closer. The kind of people who arrived in cars like that didn't notice people like us. We were scenery, background noise, obstacles to step around. The back door opened, a man emerged, and the air itself seemed to change. He was young. Younger than I'd expected from the weight of authority that preceded him, perhaps early 30s, with dark hair that fell just slightly across his forehead, despite obvious expensive styling. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored to shoulders that suggested both the gym and something more primal, more dangerous. But it was his face that made my breath catch. Sharp jawline, full lips set in a neutral expression that somehow conveyed absolute control, and eyes. God, those eyes. So dark they were almost black. Scanning the street with the kind of awareness that missed nothing. He moved like violence in slow motion, all coiled energy and deliberate grace. 2 men flanked him immediately, appearing from the front seats like shadows given form. They wore dark suits too, but theirs were different, functional, slightly bulky around the shoulders, and ribs where I suspected weapons rested. One of them opened an umbrella, holding it over the dark-haired man's head, while the other scanned the street with a hand hovering near his jacket. I should have looked away, should have made myself invisible the way I'd learned to do, the way survival demanded, but something held me frozen. Maybe exhaustion, maybe desperation, maybe the way Emma's hand squeezed mine as she stared up at the man with the kind of wonder only children possessed, and then his eyes found mine. The connection was electric, visceral, a physical thing that made my skin prickle despite the cold. His gaze swept over me in one quick assessment, taking in my soaked clothes, my daughter on my hip, the shopping bag that held everything we owned. And something flickered across his face. Not pity. Something darker, more complex. Recognition, maybe, though we'd never met. Or possession. Like he'd just found something he hadn't known he was looking for. Time suspended. The rain continued falling. The street continued breathing. But in that moment, there was only his eyes on mine, and the sudden, terrifying sense that my life had just pivoted on an axis I couldn't see. One of his men stepped forward, breaking the spell. "Mr. Constantine, we should go inside." Constantine. The name registered somewhere in the back of my mind, stirring vague memories of news reports I'd tried not to read, of whispered warnings from Marcus in those final days before he'd run. The Constantine family, East European, old money that everyone knew wasn't old at all, wasn't legitimate, wasn't the kind you wanted to owe or know or even think about too hard. I needed to leave. Needed to grab Emma and disappear into the rain before whatever interest I'd accidentally captured could solidify into something dangerous. But my body wouldn't cooperate, wouldn't respond to the frantic signals my brain was sending. "Mommy?" Emma's voice was uncertain now, picking up on my tension. "You're holding too tight." I loosened my grip on her hand, forced my lungs to remember how to work. "Sorry, baby. We should... wait." The word cut through the rain, through the noise of the city, through every instinct screaming at me to run. His voice was accented, Russian maybe or something similar, but smooth, controlled, the kind of voice that expected obedience and received it. He was walking toward us. His bodyguards moved with him, a choreographed dance of protection that suggested they'd done this 1,000 times. The umbrella stayed over his head, keeping him dry while his polished shoes navigated puddles with practiced ease. Each step brought him closer, and each step made my heart hammer harder against my ribs. "Mr. Constantine, please," one of the bodyguards said, urgency creeping into his professional tone. "It's fine, Alexei." Constantine didn't take his eyes off me. "I'll only be a moment." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke and something else I couldn't name. Up close, he was even more devastating, all sharp angles and barely contained intensity. There was a small scar above his left eyebrow, almost invisible. The only imperfection in an otherwise flawless facade. "You're wet," he observed, his gaze traveling over Emma and me with an intensity that felt intrusive, like he was cataloging every detail, every weakness, every secret. I found my voice, though it came out rougher than I wanted. "It's raining." Something that might have been amusement touched his lips. "So it is." He tilted his head slightly, studying me the way someone might study a painting they were considering purchasing. "You're waiting for someone?" "No. We were just..." I stopped, unsure how to explain that we were standing in the rain because we had nowhere else to go, because sometimes the only thing left was to keep moving and hope the motion itself would provide an answer. "Don't cry, Mom," Emma suddenly said, her small voice cutting through the tension. I hadn't even realized tears were mixing with the rain on my cheeks. She lifted her hand, pointing at Constantine with the unfiltered directness only children possessed. "Maybe that stranger will help us." Horror flooded through me. "Emma, no." But Constantine's attention had shifted to my daughter, his expression changing in ways I couldn't read. He crouched down, an action that made both bodyguards tense visibly, bringing himself to Emma's eye level. The rain immediately began soaking his expensive suit, but he didn't seem to notice or care. "Hello," he said softly, his voice losing some of its edge. "What's your name?" "Emma." She hugged her rabbit closer, suddenly shy despite her boldness moments before. "This is Mr. Hoppy. He's missing an eye." "I see." Constantine reached out slowly, letting Emma decide if she wanted the contact, and when she extended the rabbit, he examined it with surprising gentleness. A warrior, then. The best fighters carry their scars with pride. Something twisted in my chest, a dangerous warmth that had no place in this moment, with this man, on this street. I shifted Emma higher on my hip, preparing to make excuses and disappear, but Constantine was already standing, his attention back on me with doubled intensity. "How much?" he asked. My stomach dropped. What? How much do you need? His hand moved to his jacket, and I caught a glimpse of something metallic beneath. A gun, I realized with a jolt of terror, before he pulled out a wallet. Leather. Expensive. Probably worth more than 3 months of the rent I could no longer pay. I'm not... Humiliation burned hot in my throat. We don't need your money. Everyone needs something. He pulled out bills. Hundreds, I noticed, multiple hundreds, and held them toward me. Consider it a gift. From a stranger? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. Nothing's free. What would you want in return? The question hung between us, loaded with implications I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. His bodyguards shifted, uncomfortable, but Constantine's expression didn't change. He studied me for a long moment, rain dripping from his dark hair. Those black eyes seeing too much. Smart, he finally said. You're right to be suspicious, but tonight, I want nothing except to help a woman and her daughter get out of the rain. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the flecks of gray in his irises, close enough that his presence overwhelmed everything else. Take it. Feed your child. Find somewhere warm to sleep. His hand reached out, and before I could pull away, he tucked the bills into the pocket of my jacket. His fingers brushed against my hip through the thin fabric, the touch burning despite its brevity. Then he leaned in. Close. Too close. His breath warm against my ear. This doesn't end here, he whispered. So soft his bodyguards couldn't hear. I'm going to find out why you're on my street, crying in the rain. I'm going to learn your name, your story, every secret you're trying to hide. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, and what I saw there made my blood run cold and hot simultaneously. And then, I'm going to decide what to do with you. Before I could respond, before I could even process the threat wrapped in gentleness, he was turning away, striding back toward the restaurant with his shadows flanking him. The door opened as if by magic, golden light spilling out, and then he was gone, disappeared into a world I didn't belong to, and never would. I stood frozen, Emma still on my hip, rain still falling, my pocket heavy with money I shouldn't have taken but desperately needed. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice that sounded like my mother's was screaming warnings I couldn't quite hear over the sudden, terrifying certainty that everything had just changed, that I'd just made a mistake I wouldn't be able to undo, that the stranger Emma had pointed to wasn't help at all, but something far more dangerous. A trap wrapped in expensive cologne and dark promises, a cage disguised as salvation. And I'd just walked right into it. The motel room smelled like cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner, but it had a lock on the door and hot water that actually ran. I stood under the shower spray until my skin turned pink, washing away 3 days of street grime while Emma slept in the sagging double bed, her rabbit clutched tight against her chest. The money from Constantine sat on the cracked bathroom counter, $800 bills that felt like they were burning through the cheap laminate. I should throw them away, should leave them in the trash and walk out with whatever dignity I had left. Instead, I'd bought Emma a hot meal, chicken nuggets and fries that she'd devoured so fast I'd worried she'd make herself sick. I'd paid for 3 nights at this motel, bought us both clean clothes from the discount store down the street, and still had enough left to keep us fed for a week. Maybe 2 if I was careful. Blood money, probably. Drug money, certainly. Money from whatever empire a man like Constantine had built on the backs of people who couldn't fight back. But it was also food in my daughter's stomach, and a roof over her head. And I'd learned that morality was a luxury reserved for people who weren't choosing between pride and survival. I dressed in the new clothes, cheap jeans and a sweater that wasn't soaked through, and sat on the edge of the bed, watching Emma sleep. She looked so peaceful, so innocent. One small hand curled near her face. She didn't know that her father had stolen from the wrong people, didn't know that the reason we'd been running for 6 months was because Marcus had decided cocaine distribution was easier money than construction work, had skimmed from shipments, had vanished with enough product to make very dangerous men very angry. Didn't know that those men had found me instead, had made it clear that Marcus's debt was now mine. $20,000. Might as well have been 20 million. I'd tried everything. Extra shifts at the diner until they'd let me go for being too slow, too distracted. applying for loans I'd never qualify for, begging relatives who'd stopped answering my calls years ago. And through it all, the interest kept accumulating. The threats kept escalating, until finally I'd realized the only way to keep Emma safe was to disappear completely, to become invisible, to accept that we were on our own. My phone buzzed. The prepaid cell I'd bought with the last of my legitimate money. Unknown number. My stomach clenched as I answered, already knowing what I'd hear. 3 days late, Natalie. Victor's voice was conversational, almost friendly, which somehow made it worse. He was the one they'd sent to collect. A thick-necked man with dead eyes and hands that had left bruises on my arms the last time we'd met. I'm disappointed. I'm working on it. My voice came out steadier than I felt. I just need a little more time. Time's expensive. Gets more expensive every day you make me wait. A pause, the sound of him breathing. Pretty thing like you, though. There are always options, places that would pay good money for... Don't. The word came out sharp, final. I'll get you the money. You better. Because next time I come looking, I might decide to get creative about collection methods. Another pause. Heavier this time. How's your daughter? Emma, right? Cute kid. Saw her picture on your Facebook before you deleted it. My blood turned to ice. Leave her out of this. Then give me what I'm owed. He hung up without another word, leaving me staring at the phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. $20,000. I had maybe $500 left after paying for the room and food. Even if I could find work, legitimate work, it would take years to pay off that kind of debt. Years of looking over my shoulder. Years of Victor's threats hanging over us like a blade waiting to drop. Years of Emma growing up in motels and shelters, never having a home, never being safe. I looked down at my daughter, at her peaceful face, and felt something inside me crack. She deserved better. Deserved a mother who could protect her, provide for her, give her the childhood I'd once dreamed of having myself. Instead, she had me. A waitress with no family, no money, no options. Just bad decisions and worse luck. The business card was in my jacket pocket. I'd found it when I'd hung the wet clothes to dry. Expensive cardstock with embossed lettering and a phone number, nothing else. He must have slipped it in when he'd tucked the money away. Another calculated move in whatever game he was playing. I should throw it away. Should pretend tonight never happened. That Constantine's dark eyes and dangerous promises were just a fever dream brought on by desperation and rain. But Victor's threats echoed in my mind, mixing with the memory of Constantine's whispered words. I'm going to find out why you're on my street. I'm going to learn your name, your story, every secret you're trying to hide. Maybe he already had. Maybe that's why he'd stopped, why he'd given me money, why he'd looked at me like I was something he'd decided to keep. Men like him didn't do anything without reason, didn't offer help without expecting something in return. The money wasn't charity, it was an investment, a down payment on whatever he thought I was worth. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay next to Emma in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of the motel, doors slamming, voices arguing, the hum of the ice machine down the hall. Every noise made me tense, made me think of Victor finding us, of worse men with worse intentions. The lock on the door was flimsy. The windows didn't fully close. We were safe for tonight, but safety was temporary when you had nothing to defend it with. When I finally slept, I dreamed of dark eyes and expensive cologne, of cages made of gold and chains that felt like silk. Morning came too bright through the thin curtains. Emma woke hungry again, always hungry now, making up for the meals she'd missed. And I used more of Constantine's money to buy us breakfast at the diner across the street. Pancakes for her, coffee for me, the bitter liquid doing little to ease the exhaustion that had settled into my bones. Are we staying here, Mommy? Emma asked around a mouthful of syrup-soaked pancake. At the motel? For a few days, I forced a smile. Until I find us something better. I like it. The bed bounces. She demonstrated, making the vinyl seat squeak. And there's a TV. Can we watch cartoons? Sure, baby. But even as I said it, I was calculating. 3 nights paid for, maybe 4 if I skipped meals. Then what? Back to the streets? Back to sleeping in the laundromat, to Emma asking why we couldn't go home, to the slow erosion of everything that made us human. The diner's TV was playing the morning news, traffic reports, weather, local crime. I wasn't paying attention until the anchor's voice sharpened, taking on that tone they used for serious stories, increasing concern about organized crime activity in the metropolitan area. Federal investigators say they're focusing on several key figures, including Damian Constantine, alleged head of one of the city's most powerful criminal organizations. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. The screen showed a photo, a surveillance shot, grainy and distant, but unmistakably him. Same dark hair, same sharp features, same aura of controlled danger even through the pixelated image. He was getting into a car, surrounded by men in suits, his face turned slightly away from the camera as if he'd known it was there. Constantine, 33, is suspected of involvement in drug trafficking, money laundering, and racketeering, the anchor continued. Despite multiple investigations, prosecutors have been unable to bring charges due to lack of evidence and witness cooperation. Sources say Constantine runs his operation with ruthless efficiency, maintaining power through a combination of fear and loyalty. I stopped listening. The coffee tasted like ash in my mouth. Drug trafficking, the same business that had destroyed my life, that had turned Marcus from the charming man I'd loved into a paranoid stranger who'd abandoned his family to save himself. And I'd taken money from someone even worse, someone who didn't just work for the cartels but commanded them, someone who'd looked at me like I was something to own. "Mommy, you're not eating." Emma's voice pulled me back. She was watching me with those two old eyes, the ones that had seen too much for a 6-year-old. "Are you sad again?" "No, sweetheart, just tired." I set down the coffee, pushed away thoughts of Constantine and his whispered threats. "Finish your breakfast. Then we'll go back and watch those cartoons, okay?" But my mind was racing, connecting dots I didn't want to see. Constantine had been outside that specific restaurant, on that specific street, had appeared exactly when I'd been at my lowest, most vulnerable, had given me money and a business card, and a promise that felt more like a threat. This doesn't end here. What if it wasn't coincidence? What if he'd known I'd be there, known about Emma, known about Marcus's debt? Men like him had resources, had eyes everywhere, had ways of finding information that ordinary people couldn't hide. And if he knew about the debt, knew about Victor's threats, then the money wasn't charity at all. It was bait, and I'd taken it. My hands started shaking again. I set them flat on the table, willing them to still, but the fear kept building. I'd been so desperate, so focused on Emma's immediate needs, that I hadn't stopped to ask the obvious questions. Why me? Why now? What did a man like Constantine want with a broke waitress and her daughter? Nothing good. The answer was always nothing good. We walked back to the motel in silence, Emma chattering about the pancakes while I scanned every car, every face, looking for threats I wouldn't recognize until they were too close. The business card felt like it was burning through my pocket. I should call the number, try to return the money, explain that I'd made a mistake, and wanted nothing to do with whatever plans he had, but Victor's voice echoed in my memory. There are always options, places that would pay good money for. I had no options. That was the truth I kept trying to avoid. No job, no home, no family to run to, just a daughter who needed me to be stronger than I felt, and smarter than I'd been, and a debt that kept growing, kept pushing me toward choices that would destroy what little of myself I had left. The motel room felt smaller in daylight, the water stains on the ceiling more obvious, the smell of old smoke impossible to ignore. Emma turned on the TV, found her cartoons, curled up on the bed with Mr. Hoppy. I sat by the window, staring out at the parking lot, at the normalcy of people coming and going with their normal problems and normal lives. The black car arrived just after noon. Same vehicle as last night, same polished perfection, pulling into the motel parking lot like it owned the place. My heart stopped, then started again, racing. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't random. He'd found me, or more likely, had known exactly where I was the entire time. The back door opened, and Constantine stepped out. Daylight made him no less dangerous. If anything, it highlighted the carefully constructed power in every movement, the way his bodyguards materialized around him, the way other motel guests suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. He wore a different suit today, navy this time, with a white shirt open at the collar, but the same aura of leashed violence, of controlled chaos waiting for permission to break free. He looked up at my window. Our eyes met across the distance, and smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who'd found prey, of someone who'd been patient and was about to collect their reward. He said something to one of his bodyguards, then started walking toward the motel entrance, toward my room, toward whatever confrontation I'd been dreading since I'd pocketed his money. "Emma!" My voice came out too sharp, making her look up from the TV with startled eyes. "Go into the bathroom. Lock the door. Don't come out until I tell you, okay? But Mommy." "Now, baby. Please." Something in my tone made her obey. She grabbed Mr. Hoppy and disappeared into the bathroom, the lock clicking shut. I heard the knock on the door a moment later. Not aggressive. Just 3 measured raps that somehow conveyed absolute certainty that the door would open. I checked the peephole first. Constantine stood there, alone, his bodyguards positioned strategically in the parking lot. He looked directly at the peephole, as if he could see me through it, and raised one eyebrow, waiting. My hand shook as I unlocked the door and opened it just wide enough to block entry. "How did you find me?" "I own the motel." His voice was calm, matter of fact, like this was the most natural thing in the world. "I own most of the buildings on this street. Did you really think I'd give you money without knowing where you'd spend it?" Of course. Of course he'd anticipated my moves, had channeled me exactly where he wanted me. The trap had been set before I'd even known I was prey. "What do you want?" I kept my voice low, aware of Emma in the bathroom, of how thin the walls were, to talk. He glanced past me into the room, and I instinctively shifted to block his view. Something flickered in his expression. Approval, maybe, at my protective instincts. "May I come in?" "No." "Natalie." My name on his lips sent a chill down my spine. He knew. Of course he knew. Probably knew everything. My full name, my history, Marcus's betrayal, Victor's threats. "I'm not here to hurt you, but we need to have a conversation, and I'd prefer not to do it in a doorway. I'll return your money. All of it. I shouldn't have taken it. The money's yours. No strings attached." He paused, studying my face. "Well, perhaps one string. An honest conversation about why you're running and what you're running from. That's none of your business. It became my business the moment you ended up on my street." He stepped closer, close enough that I could smell that cedar and smoke cologne again, could see the absolute certainty in his dark eyes. "Let me in, Natalie, or I'll have my men search every inch of this motel until I find what I'm looking for. Your choice, but one option is considerably less disruptive to your daughter." The threat was implicit, but clear. I could cooperate, or he'd make things difficult in ways I couldn't prevent. And he was right. I couldn't protect Emma from men with guns and authority that came from fear rather than law. I stepped back, letting the door swing open. Constantine entered like he owned the space, which, apparently, he did. His gaze swept the room in one efficient scan, taking in the discount store bags, the clothes drying over the chair, Emma's rabbit on the bed. When his attention returned to me, something had shifted in his expression. Not quite softness, but something adjacent to it. "Where's your daughter?" "Somewhere safe from you. Smart." He moved to the window, looking out at his car, his guards, his domain. "Marcus Reeves, former construction worker, current fugitive, stole approximately $40,000 worth of cocaine from the Volkov organization 6 months ago and disappeared." He turned back to face me, "leaving you to deal with Victor's collection efforts." My legs felt weak. I leaned against the dresser, needing the support. "You know about Marcus." "I know everything about Marcus. I know he proposed to you on a Tuesday, that Emma was born premature, that you worked double shifts to keep the lights on while he gambled away your savings." Constantine's voice was clinical, detached, listing facts like he was reading from a file. "I know the Volkovs found you 4 weeks after he ran. I know Victor broke 2 of your ribs when you couldn't pay. I know you've been homeless for 3 days and desperate for considerably longer." Shame burned through me, hot and acidic. "If you know everything, then you know I have nothing you could possibly want. So why are you here?" He was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he moved closer, each step deliberate, until he was standing directly in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes, because Marcus didn't steal from the Volkovs, he said softly. He stole from me. The world tilted. I gripped the dresser harder, knuckles white. What? The Volkovs distribute for me, have for 5 years, which means anything they lose, I lose. His hand came up, and I flinched, but he only tucked a strand of damp hair behind my ear, his touch surprisingly gentle. Your boyfriend didn't just ruin his life, Natalie. He took what was mine, and I always collect on my debts. The air in the room felt too thin, like all the oxygen had been sucked out through the gaps in the window frame. I stared at Constantine, at the deadly calm in his eyes, and felt the floor dropping out from under me. Not the Volkovs. Him. Marcus had stolen from him. I don't have $40,000. My voice came out strangled, desperate. I don't have anything. You've seen where I'm living. I'm not here for money. He stepped back, giving me space to breathe, but his presence still dominated the cramped room. Money is replaceable. Marcus is replaceable, but principle, that's something else entirely. Then what do you want? But even as I asked, part of me already knew. The way he'd looked at me last night, the way he was looking at me now. Like I was a problem he'd decided to solve in a very specific way. Constantine moved to the bed, sat down on the edge with casual authority, like he belonged there. Tell me about Emma's father, not the sanitized version, not the story you tell yourself to sleep at night. The truth. I should refuse. Should tell him to leave. Should grab Emma and run, even though there was nowhere left to run to. But something in his tone, not quite gentle, but not cruel either, made me answer. We met at a bar, 3 years ago. The words came slowly, painfully, like pulling glass from a wound. He was charming, funny, said all the right things. I was working 2 jobs, barely making rent, and he made me feel like maybe life could be different. Better. You got pregnant. Emma was a surprise, but a good one. Marcus seemed happy about it. At first, I wrapped my arms around myself, remembering those early months when I'd still believed his promises. Then things changed. He started coming home late, started getting phone calls he'd take in the other room. Money appeared, then disappeared. When I asked questions, he'd get angry. He hit you? The question was casual, but something dangerous flickered behind Constantine's eyes. I shook my head. No, never that. Just distant. Like we were obstacles he had to work around. I paused. The next part harder to admit. I knew something was wrong, knew he was involved in something illegal. But I told myself it was temporary, that he'd stop once Emma was born, that I could fix it somehow. Classic mistake. Constantine's tone held no judgment, just observation. Thinking you could save him. I was stupid. You were in love. Different thing. Though the results are often the same. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, watching me with that unnerving intensity. When did you realize he'd stolen from us? I didn't. Not until Victor showed up at my door 6 months ago, asking where Marcus was. The memory made my skin crawl. He had photos. Marcus with bags of product, meeting with people I didn't recognize. Victor said Marcus owed $40,000 for what he'd taken, plus interest. Said if I couldn't produce Marcus, I'd have to pay instead. And you've been running ever since. What choice did I have? Anger flared, hot and bitter. Go to the police? Tell them my boyfriend stole drugs from drug dealers? They'd laugh me out of the station, or worse, arrest me as an accomplice. I had Emma to think about, to protect. So yes, I ran. I changed our names, moved 3 times, worked cash jobs that didn't ask questions. But Victor always found me, always. Constantine was quiet, processing. His fingers drummed once against his knee, the only sign of tension in his otherwise controlled demeanor. Victor's good at his job, persistent, thorough, but not particularly creative. What does that mean? It means, if you'd come to me 6 months ago, this would have been resolved already. He stood, moving to the window again, his silhouette dark against the afternoon light. Instead, you've been suffering unnecessarily, while Victor's been skimming the interest payments for himself. My breath caught. What? The debt was $20,000, Natalie, not 40. Victor's been inflating numbers, pocketing the difference. Standard middle management corruption. He glanced back at me, something cold and final in his expression. I don't tolerate theft, not from outside my organization, and certainly not from within it. The implication hung heavy in the air. Whatever Victor had been doing, whatever advantage he'd thought he had, it was about to end badly for him. And despite everything, despite knowing what Constantine was, what he did, I felt a savage satisfaction at the thought of Victor getting what he deserved. So what happens now? I forced myself to ask. You said you always collect on debts. I do. Constantine turned fully, leaning against the window frame, backlit like something from a film noir. But as I said, I'm not interested in money. Marcus is gone, probably dead in a ditch somewhere, knowing the kind of men he was stupid enough to cross. The product is long since sold or used. What I'm interested in is the principle of the thing. I don't understand. He took something of mine, so I'm going to take something of his. The words were soft, almost gentle, but they sent ice through my veins. Constantine pushed off the window, crossed the space between us with predatory grace. You, Natalie. You and Emma. You're going to be mine now. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think past the roaring in my ears. You can't. I can do whatever I want. He stopped inches away, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. But I'm not a monster, despite what you might think. I'm offering you a choice. What choice? My voice was barely a whisper. Option 1. I call off Victor. Forgive the debt. You and Emma walk away free, and I never contact you again. He paused, letting that sink in. Option 2. You come with me. Live under my protection. Want for nothing. Give Emma the life she deserves. In exchange, you belong to me. Completely. My heart hammered against my ribs. That's not a choice. That's a transaction, he finished. A fair one, given the circumstances. Your freedom for his debt, or your loyalty for my protection. Both options clear the slate. Wipe away what Marcus did. The difference is what comes after. I wanted to laugh at the absurdity, to scream at the audacity. But looking into his dark eyes, I saw only absolute certainty. He meant every word, would honor either choice without hesitation or regret. Why? The question burst out before I could stop it. Why would you want this? You could have anyone. I could, he agreed. But I don't want anyone. I want you. His hand came up, cupping my jaw with surprising gentleness, thumb brushing across my cheekbone. I saw you last night, standing in the rain with your daughter, too proud to beg but too desperate not to hope. I saw strength in you, Natalie. Loyalty. The kind of fire that doesn't break even when it should. You don't know me. I know enough. I know you've sacrificed everything for Emma. Know you've survived 6 months of Victor's threats without breaking, without selling out or giving up. Know you took my money not because you wanted to, but because your daughter needed to eat. His thumb traced my lower lip, the touch electric. That kind of devotion is rare, valuable, and I'm a man who recognizes value when I see it. This is insane, but I didn't pull away from his touch, didn't step back. My body had betrayed me, responding to the warmth of his hand, the dark promise in his eyes. Is it? You need protection, resources, safety. I need someone loyal, someone who understands what it means to fight for family. His other hand settled on my hip, anchoring me in place. Everyone in my world wants something from me. Power, money, advancement. But you just want your daughter safe. That's refreshingly honest. I don't want to belong to anyone. The protest sounded weak even to my own ears. No one does. Not at first. He leaned closer, his breath warm against my temple. But belonging isn't the prison you think it is, Natalie. It can be sanctuary, protection, a place where you're valued instead of used, treasured instead of tolerated. Until you get bored. Until I disappoint you. I don't get bored easily, and I protect what's mine with everything I have. His lips brushed my ear, sending shivers down my spine. Choose me, and no one will ever hurt you again. Not Victor, not anyone. You'll have a home, security, everything Emma needs. All I ask in return is your loyalty and your presence in my life. It was seduction wrapped in logic, temptation disguised as practicality, and the terrifying thing was how appealing it sounded, how tired I was of running, of fear, of the constant weight of survival pressing down until I couldn't breathe. He was offering me an escape, not freedom, but something perhaps more valuable given my circumstances. Safety. I need to think. No. The word was firm, final. This isn't a decision you think through, weighing pros and cons like you're choosing a car. This is instinct, Natalie. What does your gut tell you? My gut told me I was standing too close to a fire that would either warm me or burn me alive. Told me that Constantine was dangerous in ways Victor never could be, not because of violence, but because of how easily he could make me want the cage he was offering. I need to talk to Emma. Emma will adjust. Children are resilient, but his expression softened slightly. I'm not asking you to lie to her. Tell her the truth. That I'm someone who can help us, who will keep you both safe. She's already asked for my help once. Let me give it. The bathroom door was still closed. Emma still safe behind it, oblivious to the negotiation happening over her future. Our future. I thought about Victor's threats, about the years of looking over my shoulder, about the slow erosion of everything that made us human. Thought about the alternative Constantine offered. A gilded cage, yes, but a cage with food and warmth, and the promise that Emma would never have to sleep in a laundromat again. And if I say no, I force myself to ask. If I choose option 1, then I honor it. You walk away, debt forgiven, no strings attached. His hand slipped from my face and I immediately missed the warmth. But Natalie, be honest with yourself. Where will you go? What will you do? Victor might be dealt with, but there are other Victors, other dangers. You have no money, no job, no support system. How long before you're back on the street, back to sleeping in laundromats and praying no one notices? He was right. The truth of it settled in my stomach like lead. Without his protection, without someone powerful enough to make the threat stop, Emma and I were just delaying the inevitable. Maybe not Victor, but someone else. The world was full of predators, and we were prey with nowhere left to hide. I need a guarantee, I heard myself say, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. About Emma. Whatever happens between us, whatever I agree to, she stays safe. Always. That's non-negotiable. Constantine's smile was slow, approving, like I'd passed some test I hadn't known I was taking. Emma will have everything she needs. Education, security, a childhood free from fear. She'll be protected as if she were my own daughter. You have my word. The word of a criminal. The word of a man who has never broken a promise. He extended his hand, palm up, waiting. Take my hand, Natalie. Choose sanctuary over struggle. Choose me. I looked at his hand. Broad palm, long fingers, no rings, a hand that had probably done terrible things, ordered deaths, destroyed lives. But also a hand that had tucked money into my pocket, that had touched my face with unexpected gentleness, that was offering salvation in the only form I could afford. Behind me, I heard Emma shifting in the bathroom, humming softly to herself, innocent, trusting, believing that her mother would always find a way to keep her safe. I thought about Marcus, about how love had made me stupid, had made me overlook red flags until it was too late. But this wasn't love. This was a transaction, clear-eyed and honest in its brutality. Constantine wasn't promising romance or happiness. He was promising protection and possession in equal measure. Maybe that was better. Maybe honesty. Even dark honesty was safer than pretty lies. My hand moved before I'd consciously decided, fingers sliding across his palm. His hand closed around mine immediately, warm and strong and absolutely certain. The connection felt electric, final, like I'd just signed a contract written in something more permanent than ink. Smart choice, Constantine murmured, pulling me closer. You won't regret it. But as his arms wrapped around me, as I breathed in cedar and smoke and felt the solid weight of his presence surrounding me, I wasn't sure if I believed him. I wasn't sure if I believed myself. All I knew was that I'd just walked into a cage. And unlike the streets, unlike Victor's threats, this one came with a lock I'd never be able to pick, because the most dangerous prisons weren't made of bars and concrete. They were made of silk sheets and whispered promises and the terrible comfort of letting someone else carry the weight you could no longer bear alone. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a building I'd passed 100 times without really seeing. Glass and steel and money so old it didn't need to announce itself. Constantine's hand stayed at the small of my back as we rode the private elevator up. Emma clutched against my side, her eyes wide as she took in the polished mirrors and soft music that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "It's like a princess castle," she whispered, awe-coding every syllable, something like that. Constantine replied, his tone softer than I'd heard it. He'd been different with Emma since we'd left the motel. Patient, careful, like he understood she was the key to whether this arrangement would work. "Do you like high places?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. "Mommy took me to the tall building once. We could see the whole city. This is taller." The elevator doors slid open, revealing an entrance hall that belonged in a magazine. White marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. Floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city like a painting. "Welcome home." Home. The word felt foreign on his lips, applied to a space that looked more like a museum than anywhere people actually lived. But Emma was already slipping from my grasp, running to the windows with childish delight, pressing her hands against the glass to see the streets far below. "Mommy, look. The cars are tiny." I moved to her automatically, needing to be close, needing to make sure she was safe even 20 stories up with reinforced glass between her and the fall. Constantine watched us with an expression I couldn't read, something thoughtful and calculating behind his dark eyes. "Alexei will show you to your rooms," he said, gesturing to one of his ever-present bodyguards. "Get settled. I have business to attend to, but I'll be back for dinner." "Our rooms?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "You thought I'd throw you into my bed immediately?" A slight smile, almost amused. "I'm not that crude, Natalie. You and Emma will have your own suite, bedroom, bathroom, sitting area, everything you need. My room is on the other side of the penthouse, for now." The implication was clear. Separate rooms were a temporary arrangement, a concession to ease the transition, but eventually he'd expect more than just my presence in his home. Eventually, he'd expect me in his bed. The thought sent heat through me, equal parts fear, and something I didn't want to examine too closely. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed Alexei down a hallway lined with more expensive art. Emma skipped ahead, already adapting with the resilience Constantine had promised, her earlier tears forgotten in the excitement of a new place. Our suite was larger than any apartment I'd ever lived in. The bedroom had a king-sized bed with cream-colored linens that looked impossibly soft, a sitting area with a couch and chairs, windows that offered a different angle of the city. The bathroom was all marble and gold fixtures, with a tub big enough to swim in, and off the bedroom was a smaller room, clearly meant for Emma, with a bed sized for a child, and walls painted soft lavender. "Mr. Constantine had it prepared this afternoon," Alexei said, his English heavily accented but clear. "If you need different colors, different furniture, just say, he wants the little one comfortable. This is..." I couldn't finish the sentence. Too much. Too fast. Too overwhelming to process that this morning I'd been in a motel room that smelled like smoke, and now I was standing in luxury I couldn't have imagined. "He takes care of what's his," Alexei continued, something almost like approval in his gruff voice. "You're safe here. Both of you. No one gets past building security without Mr. Constantine's permission. No one." The message was clear. I was protected, but I was also trapped. Two sides of the same coin. After Alexei left, I helped Emma explore her new room, watching as she bounced on the bed and squealed at the softness as she discovered the closet already filled with clothes in her size. Dresses and jeans and pajamas, all with the tags still on. Someone had estimated her measurements remarkably well. Or Constantine had bought multiple sizes, ensuring something would fit. "Can I really keep all this?" Emma asked, holding up a yellow dress with white flowers. "It's so pretty." "Yes, baby. It's yours." The words felt strange. Nothing had been ours in so long. Everything borrowed or stolen or destined to be left behind when we ran again. But there would be no more running. That realization settled over me like a weight, pressing down until I had to sit on the edge of her bed to catch my breath. "Mommy, are you crying?" "No, sweetheart, just tired." I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, still the cheap shampoo from the motel, not yet replaced by whatever expensive products waited in our bathroom. "Are you okay with this? With staying here?" Emma considered the question with the seriousness only children could manage. "The man from the rain? Mr. Constantine?" "Yes. He seems nice, and he said we'd be safe." She looked up at me with those trusting eyes. "Will we? Be safe?" "Yes." The certainty in my voice surprised me. Whatever else Constantine was, whatever darkness lived behind his controlled exterior, I believed that promise. He would keep us safe. He'd keep Emma safe. "We will." "Then I like it here." She hugged Mr. Hoppy closer. "Can I take a bath in the big tub?" "Of course." I ran the water, watched Emma play with bubbles that probably cost more per bottle than I used to spend on groceries, and tried to reconcile this new reality with everything that had come before. 24 hours ago, I'd been standing in the rain with nothing. Now I had everything, except freedom, except choice, except the ability to walk away when things inevitably got complicated. Because they would get complicated. Men like Constantine didn't stay simple, didn't keep their worlds separate and clean. There would be violence, maybe not directed at me, but present nonetheless. There would be other women, probably, because men with power always had options. There would be rules I didn't understand until I broke them, consequences I couldn't predict. But Emma would be fed, would sleep in a safe bed, would go to school without worrying about where we'd sleep that night. That had to be enough. Had to be worth whatever price I'd eventually pay. Dinner was served in a dining room that could have seated 20 but held only 3. Constantine sat at the head of the polished table, Emma and I on either side, close enough for conversation but far enough to maintain the illusion of formality. The food was prepared by someone I never saw, appearing as if by magic, course after course of dishes I couldn't name, but that tasted like heaven. Emma ate with enthusiasm, her earlier shyness forgotten. "This is the best chicken ever," she declared, tomato sauce on her chin. "It's coq au vin," Constantine said, amused. "French, chicken cooked in wine." "I like French food." Emma considered this seriously. "Do you have French friends?" "A few. Business associates, mostly." He cut his own food with precise movements, every gesture controlled and economical. "Do you like French things? The language? The culture?" "I don't know French." Emma's face fell slightly. "Just English, and a little Spanish from Mommy's friend." "We could change that. I have someone who could teach you if you'd like. French or Russian or Italian, whatever interests you." He glanced at me, checking permission, and I realized he was making an effort, trying to include Emma, to make her feel valued rather than tolerated. It would be easier to hate him if he was cruel, if he treated Emma like an inconvenient addition to whatever plans he had for me. But instead, he was patient, attentive, engaging her in conversation like her opinions mattered, like she mattered. "Russian sounds pretty," Emma said thoughtfully. "Can you teach me?" "Some. Though I'm told I'm not the best teacher, I get impatient." A slight smile, self-deprecating in a way that made him seem almost human. "But we'll find someone good, someone who makes it fun." After dinner, Emma started yawning, her energy finally depleted. I carried her to her room, helped her into new pajamas covered in stars, tucked her into bed with Mr. Hoppy. She was asleep before I finished the first sentence of the story I'd started to read, exhausted by the emotional weight of a day that had changed everything. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her chest rise and fall in the peaceful rhythm of sleep. She looked so small in that big bed, so vulnerable, but safe. That was what mattered. She was safe. When I returned to the living room, Constantine was standing by the windows, a glass of something amber in his hand, looking out at the city lights. He'd removed his jacket, loosened his tie, but still radiated that aura of contained power. He didn't turn when I entered, but I knew he'd heard me. "She's asleep," I said unnecessarily. "Good. She needs rest." He took a sip of his drink. "You should rest too. It's been a long day." But I didn't feel tired. Felt wired, actually, adrenaline still coursing through my veins from the constant state of alertness that had defined my life for 6 months. I need to understand the rules, what you expect from me. Rules. He finally turned, regarding me with that intense gaze. An interesting word choice. What would you call them? Guidelines, perhaps. Expectations. He set down his glass, moved closer with that predatory grace. But since you asked, you don't leave the building without security. You don't contact anyone from your old life without clearing it with me first. You don't discuss my business with anyone, including Emma. And you come when I call. The last part sent heat through me again. That unwanted flutter of something dangerous, that's it? For now. The rest we'll figure out as we go. He stopped in front of me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back. I'm not interested in breaking you, Natalie. I want you functional, healthy, present. That means you get space when you need it, autonomy within reason, the ability to be a mother to Emma without interference. And in exchange, you're mine, in every way that matters. His hand came up, fingers tracing the line of my jaw. Your loyalty, your time, eventually your body, but I'm patient. I can wait until you're ready. What if I'm never ready? You will be. The certainty in his voice should have angered me, should have triggered the urge to prove him wrong. Instead, it sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with cold, because despite everything, despite the fear and the resentment and the feeling that you've been trapped, you're attracted to me. You have been since that first moment in the rain. That's not... But the protest died on my lips because he was right. Horribly, dangerously right. Some treacherous part of me responded to the power he embodied, to the dark promise in his eyes, to the way he looked at me like I was something worth claiming. Don't lie to yourself, Malaya. The Russian endearment rolled off his tongue like silk. I see it in the way you lean toward me before you catch yourself, in the way your breath changes when I get close. Your mind might hate this arrangement, but your body already knows what it wants. His thumb brushed across my lower lip again. The same gesture from the motel, but with different context now. Here, in his space, with Emma asleep down the hall and nowhere left to run. The touch felt more intimate, more inevitable. I should go to bed, I managed, voice unsteady. Yes, you should. But he didn't move, didn't give me space to leave. But before you do, understand something. I chose you, Natalie, not just because of Marcus, not just because of debts and principle. I chose you because when I saw you standing in that rain, refusing to break despite having every reason to, I recognized something I'd thought was extinct in my world. What? Integrity. Strength that doesn't come from violence or power, but from something deeper, something real. His hand slipped to the back of my neck, holding me in place. Not rough, but firm enough that I felt the control. You're going to fight this. Fight me. Try to maintain distance and protect yourself. I understand that, but eventually you'll realize something important. What's that? I whispered. That the cage you think you're in, it was always there. Society, poverty, circumstances beyond your control. You've never been free, Natalie. All I've done is change the bars from iron to gold and give you a reason to stop fighting quite so hard. He kissed my forehead, chaste, almost tender, then released me, stepping back to give me space. Sleep well. Tomorrow we start building something new. I walked to my room on legs that felt uncertain, closed the door behind me, and leaned against it as my heart raced. Everything he'd said was calculated, designed to get under my skin, to make me question my own resistance. And the worst part was that it was working, because he was right. I'd never been free, had been trapped by poverty and bad choices, and Marcus's mistakes long before Constantine had offered me this bargain. The difference was that this cage came with comfort, with safety for Emma, with a promise that I'd never have to sleep in a laundromat or cry in the rain again. And maybe, that was worth the price of belonging to someone who'd at least be honest about what he wanted from me. I checked on Emma one more time, watched her sleep peacefully, then crawled into the impossibly soft bed and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled me under. My last thought before sleep claimed me was that Constantine's cologne still lingered on my skin, cedar and smoke marking me as his, even though he'd barely touched me, even though the real claiming hadn't even begun. 3 weeks passed like a fever dream, surreal and disorienting, punctuated by moments of startling clarity that reminded me this was real, permanent, irrevocable. Emma thrived. That was the undeniable truth that made everything else bearable. She had a tutor now, a kind woman named Mrs. Chen, who taught her math and reading in the mornings, then switched to Russian in the afternoons. Emma absorbed it all like a sponge, her laughter echoing through the penthouse in ways that made my chest ache with relief. She had friends, too. Children of Constantine's associates, carefully vetted and supervised, who came for playdates in the building's private recreation room. She had everything I'd ever wanted to give her, and couldn't. I, on the other hand, existed in a state of constant tension. Constantine kept his distance physically, sleeping in his own room, maintaining a careful space between us in public. But his presence was inescapable. He'd appear at breakfast, reading financial reports while Emma chattered about her lessons. He'd return for dinner most nights, asking about our day with genuine interest. He'd stand in doorways watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle, made me hyper-aware of every movement, every breath, waiting. He was waiting for something, though I couldn't determine what. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd been reading in the living room, one of the many books from Constantine's extensive library, when Alexei appeared, his usually stoic face tight with concern. "Mrs. Natalie, you need to come with me. Now." My heart stopped. "Emma is fine. Safe with Mrs. Chen, but Mr. Constantine needs you. There's been a situation." I followed him through hallways I'd learned to navigate, down to a level of the building I'd never seen. Concrete and steel, the polished luxury replaced by brutal functionality. Security monitors lined one wall, showing various angles of the building, the street, other locations I didn't recognize. And in the center of the room, Constantine stood with his back to us, perfectly still, except for the tension radiating from his shoulders. On the floor in front of him, bound to a chair with blood seeping from his nose and mouth, was Victor. I froze in the doorway. Victor's eyes found mine, widening with recognition and something that might have been shame or fear or both. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow. The swagger and threat drained out by whatever had happened before I'd arrived. "Natalie." Constantine didn't turn, but his voice cut through the room like a blade. "Come here." My legs moved automatically. I crossed the space, stopped beside him, close enough that I could feel the rage emanating from him in waves. His jaw was tight, hands clenched at his sides, and for the first time since I'd met him, his control seemed fractured. "Tell her," he said to Victor, each word precise and cold. "Tell her what you told me." Victor spat blood on the concrete. "I don't—" The movement was so fast I almost missed it. Constantine's hand shot out, gripping Victor's throat, cutting off air and words simultaneously. "I said tell her, or I start removing fingers until you find the motivation." "All right." Victor choked when Constantine released him. "All right, I lied about the debt. It was never 40,000. 20. And most of that was already paid through your work at the diner before you ran." The room tilted. "What?" "Mr. Constantine's accountant checked the records," Alexei said quietly from behind me. "Victor's been running a side operation, extorting people with fabricated debts, pocketing the money. You weren't the only one, but you were convenient, vulnerable. You piece of—" The words caught in my throat, choked by rage so pure it felt like fire. 3 months. 3 months of terror, of running, of watching Emma go hungry because I'd been sending every spare dollar to this man. 3 months of sleeping in laundromats and shelters, of bruises and threats, all because he'd seen an opportunity to exploit a desperate woman. "I should let you kill him," Constantine said, still watching Victor with cold assessment. "Let you have that satisfaction. But I have questions first. Like how he found you so consistently. How he knew where you'd run before you got there." Victor's remaining bravado crumbled. "GPS. I put a tracker on her phone, the old one. Followed her through 3 cities before she finally ditched it. The phone I'd thrown away 2 weeks ago in a desperate attempt to disappear completely. The phone I'd kept for so long because it had photos of Emma as a baby, memories I couldn't bear to lose. He'd been tracking me the entire time, had known every move, every desperate attempt to escape. And Marcus? Constantine's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. Where is he? Dead. Probably. Victor laughed, the sound wet and broken. Heard the Volkovs caught up with him in Mexico. He didn't have what he'd stolen, couldn't pay what he owed. You know how that story ends. Emma's father was dead, the man I'd once loved, who'd given me my daughter, who'd destroyed our lives with his greed and cowardice. Dead in a foreign country, alone, paying the price for his mistakes. I should feel something. Grief, maybe, or relief. Instead, I felt nothing. Marcus had died the moment he'd chosen drugs over his family. This was just the epilogue. One more question. Constantine circled Victor slowly, predatory and deliberate. Did you touch her? When you came to collect, did you put your hands on her? The silence stretched. Victor's eyes darted to me, then away, and I saw Constantine's hands curl into fists. Answer. Me. Once. Victor's voice was barely audible. She wouldn't pay, just once. Wouldn't cooperate. I needed to make a point. He didn't finish. Constantine moved like lightning, his fist connecting with Victor's face in a blow that snapped his head back. Blood spraying across the concrete, then another. And another. Each impact measured, controlled despite the violence, designed to cause maximum pain without killing. Stop. My voice came out stronger than I expected. Constantine, stop. He froze mid-swing, chest heaving, knuckles split and bleeding. When he turned to look at me, his eyes were black with rage, with something primal and possessive that should have terrified me. He hurt you. The words were guttural, barely human. He put his hands on what's mine, I know, and I want him to pay. I stepped closer, into his space, putting my hand on his arm. His muscles were coiled tight, trembling with restrained violence. But not like this. Not with you losing control. That's what men like him do. They make us into something we're not. He deserves worse than death. Maybe. Probably. I took his bloody hand in mine, feeling the split skin, the rage still vibrating through him. But Emma's upstairs, and when you come back to us, I need you to be the man who bought her Russian lessons and made her laugh, not the man who beats people to death in basements. Something shifted in his expression. The rage banking, control reasserting itself. He looked down at our joined hands, at the blood staining both of us now, then back at my face. You're asking me to show mercy. I'm asking you to be smart. Whatever you do to him, do it clean, professional, not like this. I squeezed his hand. Not where it touches us. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he nodded once, sharp and final. Alexei, take him. You know what to do. Yes, sir. Alexei moved forward with another guard, hauling Victor from the chair. Victor was sobbing now, begging. But the sounds faded as they dragged him toward a door I hadn't noticed, toward whatever fate Constantine had decided was appropriate. I didn't ask, didn't want to know. Whatever happened to Victor would happen outside my awareness, outside the bubble of safety Constantine had built around Emma and me. That was the deal. I lived in the light while he operated in shadows. When the room was empty except for us, Constantine raised our still-joined hands, studying them. You stopped me. Yes. No one stops me. I'm not no one. The words came out steadier than I felt. You said I was yours. That means you're mine too, and I won't watch you become a monster. Not when I've seen you be gentle with my daughter. His laugh was unexpected, rough and genuine, breaking the tension. Gentle. No one's called me that in 20 years. Then maybe they didn't know you. I reached up with my free hand, cupping his jaw the way he'd done to me so many times. His stubble was rough against my palm, his skin warm, and when his eyes met mine, I saw something vulnerable beneath the violence. Or maybe they never asked you to be anything different. And you're asking? I'm asking you to remember that Emma's watching, learning. Whatever you are, whatever you do out there. I gestured vaguely toward the door, toward his world of blood and business. When you're with us, be the man who keeps his promises, who's patient, who makes her feel safe. And you? His hand came up to cover mine on his face, holding it there. Do I make you feel safe? The question was loaded, layered with meaning. Safe from external threats? Yes. Safe from him. That was more complicated. You make me feel protected. That's different from safe, but it's what I need right now. Honest. He turned his head, pressing a kiss to my palm that sent electricity up my arm. I'm starting to understand why I can't get you out of my head. Constantine, Damien. His eyes locked with mine, intense and searching. My name is Damien. When we're alone, that's what you call me. The intimacy of it, of being given his first name like a gift, made something crack in my chest. Damien, I repeated, testing it. It felt strange on my tongue, too personal, too real. Again. Damien. This time softer, and I watched something in him shift, soften. The violence draining out of his posture. We should go back upstairs. Emma will wonder where I am. He pulled me closer until we were pressed together, his heartbeat rapid against my chest. Thank you. For what? For stopping me. For seeing something in me worth saving. His arms wrapped around me, holding me tight enough that I couldn't escape even if I wanted to. For being strong enough to stand in front of my rage and not flinch. I let myself lean into him, let the warmth of his body seep into mine. I faced worse than your anger. I know. But you shouldn't have had to. His lips found my temple, a gentle kiss that contradicted everything I knew about him. That ends now. No more running, no more fear. You're under my protection. And I take that seriously. I'm starting to believe that. We stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, the violence of moments before fading into something quieter, more dangerous maybe, because this felt real, felt like the foundation of something I hadn't agreed to but was happening anyway. When we finally pulled apart, Damien took my hand, the one not covered in his blood, and led me back through the hallways, back to the elevator, back to the world where Emma waited with her Russian lessons and innocent laughter. As the elevator climbed, I watched our reflection in the mirrored walls. We looked like a couple, his hand around mine, my head tilted toward his shoulder. Both of us marked by the violence below but rising above it, becoming something neither of us had planned. That night, everything changed. Emma was asleep, had been for hours, exhausted by a playdate that had involved too much running and laughter. I'd checked on her twice, needing the reassurance that she was safe, happy, untouched by the darkness that had unfolded in the basement. I was sitting on my bed, still dressed, when the knock came. Soft, but unmistakable. I knew who it was before I opened the door. Damien stood in the hallway, showered and changed, no trace of blood remaining. He'd shaved, tamed his hair, but his eyes still held that intensity that had been building for weeks. "Can I come in?" I stepped back, letting him enter. He closed the door behind him, leaning against it, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. "I should have asked first," he said quietly, "before bringing you to that room, before exposing you to that side of things. I knew what you were, who you are." I crossed my arms, defensive. Seeing it just made it real. "And now that it's real, are you going to run?" The question hung between us, loaded with vulnerability I hadn't expected. I looked at him, really looked, and saw past the expensive clothes and controlled danger to the man underneath. Complicated, ruthless when needed, but capable of gentleness, violent in his protection, but honest about what he wanted. "Where would I run to?" I asked softly. "You own this building, probably half the city. Your men are everywhere, watching, protecting. And even if I could leave..." I paused, forcing myself to acknowledge the truth. "I don't think I want to anymore." Something fierce flashed in his eyes. "Say that again." "I don't want to run." The admission felt like surrender and liberation simultaneously. "Emma's happy. I'm starting to feel human again. And you..." I trailed off, unsure how to finish. "I what?" He pushed off the door, crossing to me with deliberate steps. "Tell me, Natalie. I need to hear it." "You scare me." The words came out in a rush. But not because I think you'll hurt me, because of how easily I'm adapting to this, to you. How my first instinct this afternoon was to protect you, to stop you from doing something you'd regret. Like I stopped, terrified of what I was about to admit. Like you care about me. He was standing directly in front of me now, close enough that I could feel his heat. That's what scares you. That 3 weeks was enough for me to get under your skin. Yes. A whisper, barely audible. Good. His hands cupped my face, tilting my head back until I had nowhere to look but into his dark eyes. Because you've been under mine since that first moment in the rain, I've been patient, given you space, let you adjust. But I'm done waiting, Natalie. I need to know. Are you mine? Truly mine? Or are we still playing pretend? My heart hammered against my ribs. This was the moment, the pivot point where I could either retreat into safety and distance, or admit what had been building between us despite my resistance. I don't know how to be someone's, I admitted. Marcus didn't want me, not really. I don't know what you expect. I expect honesty, loyalty, your presence in my life, in my bed, in my world. His thumb stroked across my cheekbones, gentle despite the intensity in his voice. I expect you to let me take care of you, to stop fighting so hard, to trust that I'll keep my promises, and in return I'll give you everything. Protection, security, devotion that borders on obsession. That sounds intense, possessive, probably unhealthy by conventional standards. A slight smile, acknowledging the darkness in what he offered. But we're not conventional people anymore, Malaya. You stopped being conventional when you stood in front of my rage and didn't flinch. When you put your hand on my face and asked me to be better, I don't want to be another possession. You're not. His forehead touched mine, our breaths mingling. Possessions are things I own and forget about. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up, and the last before I sleep. You're the reason I come home for dinner. The reason I've turned down 3 trips abroad this month. You're becoming essential, Natalie. And that terrifies me as much as it terrifies you. The admission cracked something open in my chest. I'd expected dominance, expected him to simply take what he wanted. Instead, he was offering vulnerability, admitting that this thing between us had power over him too. I'm scared, I whispered. I know. But I'm right here. His lips brushed mine, feather light. A question rather than a demand. Let me in, Natalie. Stop fighting. Stop analyzing. Just feel. And I did. I closed the distance between us, kissing him with all the fear and want and confusion that had been building for weeks. He responded immediately, one hand sliding into my hair while the other pulled me flush against him. And suddenly there was no space, no distance, just heat and hunger, and the terrifying recognition that I was falling into something I couldn't control. His kiss was consuming, thorough, like he was claiming me one breath at a time. I gripped his shoulders, needing the anchor, needing something solid as the world tilted beneath me, when he lifted me, effortless, like I weighed nothing. I wrapped my legs around his waist instinctively, trusting him to hold me. He carried me to the bed, laid me down with surprising gentleness, and followed me down, his weight settling over me in ways that felt protective, rather than constraining. Tell me to stop, he murmured against my throat, lips tracing the pulse point there. Tell me you're not ready, and I'll walk away. I'll wait as long as you need, but I didn't want him to stop, didn't want to wait, to overthink, to let fear dictate my choices anymore. Don't stop, I breathed, fingers tangling in his hair. I'm tired of being afraid, tired of fighting. I just want... What? Tell me what you want. You. The admission felt monumental, terrifying. I want you. This. Whatever this becomes. His smile against my skin was triumphant and tender simultaneously. Then you have me. All of me. The good and the terrible, the gentle and the violent. I'm yours, Natalie. Completely. And then there were no more words, just touch and sensation and the slow burning away of every wall I'd built. He made love to me like I was precious, like every sigh and shiver mattered, and when I finally shattered in his arms, it felt like rebirth. like becoming someone new in his hands. After we lay tangled together, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my back. The silence was comfortable, weighted with understanding rather than awkwardness. "I need to tell you something," he said eventually, voice rough. "About Victor. I don't need details. Not that. Something else." He shifted, turning so we faced each other. "He's not dead. Yet," I blinked, processing. "What?" "I'm turning him over to federal authorities tomorrow. He's going to testify against the Volkov organization in exchange for witness protection." Damien's expression was serious, almost grim. "It's better this way. He goes to prison legitimately, the Volkovs lose their distribution network, and I don't have his blood on my hands. Why are you telling me this? Because you asked me to be smart, to think about Emma, about us. This is me trying." His hand cupped my face, thumb brushing my cheek. "I won't pretend to be something I'm not. My business, my life. There's darkness there that I can't erase. But when it comes to you, to Emma, to the home we're building, I can try to keep that darkness from touching you. I can choose differently." Tears pricked my eyes, gratitude and relief, and something deeper that I wasn't ready to name. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. There will be hard days, nights when I come home carrying things I can't share, times when you'll question whether this was the right choice." He pressed a kiss to my forehead. "But I promise you this, I will always come home. I will always protect you, and I will never let you regret choosing me." I believe you. And I did. Against all logic, against every warning bell that should have been ringing, I believed him. We fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt safe. Not the temporary safety of a locked door or a moment's peace, but something deeper, foundational. The safety of being chosen, protected, claimed by someone who had the power to destroy me, but chose instead to cherish me. 6 months later, I stood in the penthouse living room watching Emma practice her Russian with Mrs. Chen, her accent improving daily. Outside the windows, the city sprawled beneath us, beautiful and dangerous, and full of life we were no longer running from. Damien's arms wrapped around me from behind, pulling me against his chest. "What are you thinking? That I should be more afraid than I am?" I leaned into him, letting his warmth seep into me. That this shouldn't work, shouldn't feel right. But it does. Regrets? No. The answer came without hesitation. Some days are harder than others. Some nights I wake up and wonder if I've lost myself in this. But then Emma laughs, or you come home early to have dinner with us, or I catch you watching me like I'm something precious. And I remember, this is what I chose. Who I chose? Good. He kissed the top of my head. "Because you're stuck with me now. I don't let go of what's mine. Possessive. Hopelessly." No apology in his tone. "But you knew that when you let me in." Emma looked up from her lesson, saw us standing together, and grinned. "Mommy, Mr. Constantine, can we have pizza for dinner?" "It's just Damien, sweetheart," I called back. "And yes, we can have pizza." As Emma cheered and went back to her lesson, I felt Damien's arms tighten around me, felt the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against my back. This wasn't the life I'd imagined. Wasn't the fairy tale ending I'd once dreamed of. It was better. Real. Built on honesty and choice, and the understanding that sometimes salvation came wrapped in danger, and freedom looked like belonging to someone who'd never let you fall. I'd walked into his cage willingly, and somewhere along the way, I'd realized it wasn't a cage at all. It was home, and I was finally, impossibly, completely safe.